Today we are going to make a really fun recipe. We're making some tempeh tacos. These are lots of different flavors, lots of really good textures and colors. I always talk about making sure your meals have all those things. So you're getting a lot of that in this really delicious and colorful meal. If you're cooking along, gather your ingredients. No need to prep anything in advance. If you'd like to have some things measured out, like some of the spices, you can, but it's not necessary. A few safety things. I always mention these at the top of the class. Make sure you've got a nice sharp knife. A sharp knife gets a better grip on the food, so it's actually safer to have a sharp knife than a dull knife. Also, make sure you wash all of your produce items, even the items like a lime that you don't eat the skin, wash the outside, because when you cut through it, any bacteria on the outside can go through to the inside. So it's a safe bet to just wash all of your produce items. We've got a lot to cover. There's going to be a little bit of multitasking. So those of you that are cooking along, let me know if I'm going too fast or you need me to repeat anything. I'm happy to. So I'm going to walk you through our plan of work. That's sort of like the order in which we complete all of our steps to end up with our ingredients ready at the end. So the first thing we're going to be doing tonight is pickling our red onions. The second thing is making the avocado lime crema. Then we're going to mix a spice blend. We're going to crumble the tempeh, and then we start cooking the tempeh. Then we're going to just prep the mango, the lettuce, the other things that are going in as they are. And then it's time to assemble our tacos. So let's see. The first thing we're going to do, like I said, is make our pickled red onions. So I'm going to bring this pot over here. If you have just a small pot, doesn't need to be big at all. And we're going to be adding what we're doing is a quick pickle. So we're not fermenting these pickles. That's, a much longer process. But what we're doing is a quick pickle, which involves water. So this is a half cup of water, half cup of just tap water, pouring that into my pot. Then I've got a half cup, so the same amount as the water, and this is red wine vinegar. So you can use red wine vinegar or apple cider vinegar. If you don't have either of those, other vinegars would work fine, but red wine or apple cider are typically used when pickling red onion. So I'm pouring that in there with the water. We've got a half cup of water and half a cup of red wine vinegar. Then, if you think about, if you've had pickled red onions before, they're kind of sweet, they're kind of salty, they're tangy. So the tanginess obviously comes from the vinegar. The sweetness comes from sugar. So this is a tablespoon of just white granulated sugar. I'm dumping that in. I know that seems like a lot, but that's just going in the water. You're not going to be like drinking the pickling liquid. It's just a little bit of that sweetness is going to get soaked into the actual onions. And then of course the saltiness comes from salt. So this is 3/4 of a teaspoon of kosher salt. Okay, so I'm dumping that in there as well. So in this pot again is half a cup of water, half a cup of red wine vinegar, 1 tablespoon of sugar, and 3/4 teaspoon of salt. So I'm going to give this a whisk. I don't need to fully dissolve it right now because we're going to put this on the burner and we're going to warm it up. We're going to bring it to like just the start of a boil. It doesn't need to be like a big rolling boil. All we need to do is heat the liquid enough so that it starts bubbling a little bit. So I'm trying to, you can kind of see the solids are still sitting there at the bottom a little bit. I'm going to try and dissolve as much as I can right now. But just the heat of the liquid is also going to help this dissolve. And the liquid being agitated with the bubbles, that's also going to help it. So, all right, my solids are basically dissolved. There's a tiny bit left at the bottom. So I'm just going to put this on a burner. I have a burner right next to me. It's not on camera. You don't necessarily need to, it's right here. So I'm going to turn this burner on to like basically high heat. And I'm also just going to put a lid over this because that by trapping the heat inside, that helps it heat up faster. All right. So that's sitting off to the side. While that's heating up, we're gonna cut the onion that we're gonna be pickling. So what I have here is half of a large onion. We don't need to do an entire onion, and even this might be more than we need for the 4 servings that you're making tonight, because you really only need a little bit of red onion on your taco. But I've got half this onion here, okay? And the root end is down here, and this was the stem end. So you can see, I always like to cut onions through the root because all these onion layers go down to the root and they all are connected down here at the root. So if you want to keep your onion from falling apart, this is the way to do it. Cut it this way rather than across this way. Okay, so I've still got the papery outside here. I'm gonna just cut a little bit of that stem end, not the root end. I'm gonna keep the root end connected. So that will help me peel the skin of this onion off. You end up peeling that first layer of the onion off, that's okay. Sometimes that kind of has the papery stuff on it anyway. All right, so this is what we're working with here. So the root is still there, and this is all still attached. Okay, so what we're gonna do is lay it down flat, and we're just gonna cut thin strips, skinny strips. You want them to be nice and skinny. Think about, like, you don't want a giant chunk of onion in as your onion topping or your taco topping. So cutting them pretty thin. I'm going nice and slow to make sure I can control the thickness of these slices. And I think I hear the liquid might be boiling already because there's not a whole lot of it. Okay. And then once you get down to the root, you obviously don't want to eat that part. So you just cut as closely as you can to the root, and then you call it a day. All right. So yeah, my liquid is bubbling. It had more bubbles on the burner, but what I'm going to do, I've got this boiling liquid. I just breathed in the steam from the vinegar. Yikes. Yeah. So this slice is nice and thin. So you can kind of break apart these pieces as you drop them into the pot here. Yeah, try not to breathe in the vinegar steam. That's really unpleasant. Okay, so dropping these pieces in here to the pot. They should be mostly submerged. If not, you can add a little bit more hot water in there. So you don't have to actually keep this like on the burner at this point. You remove it from the heat. And these, pay attention to how white the onions look right now, because as they sit in this pinkish liquid and the purpley color from the onion leaches out into the liquid as well, these are going to turn much more pink colors. Okay, so these are basically submerged. The liquid comes right up to the top of the onion. Like I said, if you need more liquid, you can add some more hot water. And I'm just going to set this aside, and then we're going to come back to it at the end of the class. So these are done for now. I'm going to set this aside. All right. And now we are going to move on to our avocado crema. So those of you cooking along, how are you doing so far? If your liquid hasn't boiled yet, that's okay. Just keep an eye on it. And you can start the crema with me. And if you're, once your liquid boils, just do what I did. It takes 2 seconds. Okay. All right. So we're starting avocado crema. So crema is a creamy topping that is often used to put on tacos. So a traditional crema has not avocado or Greek yogurt like ours does, but instead has sour cream and like heavy cream or buttermilk to make it like a thin, milky drizzle. And it also has lime juice and salt. So we are doing lime juice and salt today. So the first thing I'm gonna do, I have this avocado here. It's a pretty soft avocado. It's not like caving in with the littlest bit of pressure, but it's pretty soft. That's what we want because we're gonna be mashing this. All right, so I'm cutting it lengthwise in half and then twist it around. Twist those halves and pull them apart. That is a huge avocado pit. So I actually don't get as much avocado as I thought I would. So to get the pit out, I'm moving my hand away, chop, and twist. Okay, always watch out for your hand. All right, so I brought one of my favorite forks from home. I don't know if you all have favorite forks, but this one is kind of rounded. It's perfect for avocado scooping. So I have my bowl and I'm gonna scoop this avocado right out, as much as I can get out of there. Get the other one as well. Right. And we're gonna use this fork to mash. If you have an avocado masher or potato masher at home, you can use that as well. But yeah, this fork is double duty. A good scooper and a good masher. I feel like it was during COVID, like early COVID, when we were all at home, I became obsessed with avocado toast. And that's when I discovered that this fork was the best avocado fork ever. All right, so I want to mash this like pretty much all the way. You're going to be doing more mixing when you add the other ingredients, but I really want this to be like as mashed as possible. It's okay if there's like a little bit of bumps in there. Sometimes that's just kind of hard to get when you mash, but yeah, this is pretty good. Right? So the fork is now being set aside because we're going to move on to a whisk. So I've got a 1/4 cup of plain Greek yogurt. Plain Greek yogurt is very similar. Honestly, it tastes a lot like sour cream, which is what's used in a traditional crema, but it's got extra protein. This is a low-fat Greek yogurt as well. So I'm scooping that in there. And I say low-fat Greek yogurt because this has yogurt, being an animal product, has saturated fat as the fat source. But avocado, of course, has lots of fat, but it's unsaturated fat. It's the plant source, the plant kind of fat. So we like unsaturated fat. There's plenty of unsaturated fat in here. Okay, so I'm gonna just set this aside because I want to cut the lime as well. So with any citrus, before you juice it, you really want to squish it to get as much juice out as you can. And to do that, put one hand over the other and put pressure down. Put your whole weight on that lime. Limes especially, lemons can be softer, but limes are really firm. So you want to be rolling it with lots of pressure. This lime is pretty firm. So the more you roll it, the more it should get like soft like the avocado was. And by making it softer, that makes it easier to juice it. All right, hopefully that was enough. So I'm cutting this crosswise. All right, and we need about 1 tablespoon of lime juice. I'm gonna just eyeball it. I don't have a juicer, but the good thing about limes is that they don't have those big seeds like lemons do. So you don't have to worry about catching the seeds, but squeezing my lime in here. So 1 tablespoon will probably be, depending on the size of your lime, it'll probably be a half of a lime and then maybe a little bit more into the second lime or the second half. So I'll do a little more. So the avocado, obviously, and the Greek yogurt, those are thick, but we don't want this to be so thick that you can't just sort of drizzle it over your taco. So we're adding lime juice that's gonna make it more drizzly. So I'm gonna go ahead and start stirring that. And then we're also gonna add some water to thin this out as well. If you happen to have heavy cream and you'd like to use that, that is the more traditional way to thin out a crema. So you can totally do that if you'd like. And we've also got 1/8 of a teaspoon of kosher salt, just a little. So I'm adding that in. So you can see there's still some bumps from the avocado. That's totally fine. Doesn't have to be completely smooth. You could have also made this in a food processor. That might make it smoother. All right, so look at this consistency. So think about if you're putting this on a taco, you'd have to like dollop it. So it's not very thin. I would like it to be thinner personally. If you like it thick like this, then you can keep it just like that. But I'm gonna grab some water and add a little bit. I definitely recommend only doing a little bit of water at a time. You can always add more, you can't take away. So I've got my tablespoon. So I'm adding a tablespoon of water. I'll whisk that up. It always looks like it's not that much, but then once you get it mixed in, you can see that it makes a difference. How's everybody doing at home? We good?
All good.
Right. So, all right, now we've added 1 tablespoon. Think about putting this on your taco. It's more drizzly, a little more drizzly. I might add a little more, maybe not a full tablespoon, but whatever your preference is, you can keep going with the water or you can stop. And of course, you want to give it a taste. Make sure it's good. See if it needs more lime. And we do have one final ingredient to mix into this, which is cilantro. All right, I'm going to give it a taste. Yeah, that's delicious. Got it on my face. So it's going to be even better when we add cilantro. If you're one of those people that doesn't like cilantro, this doesn't need it. It's delicious as is, but I'm gonna add cilantro. Cilantro is the herb that you will most often see with tacos. So I'm gonna pull the leaves off the stems. So they grow in a very predictable pattern. There's always, you know, a leaf on either side. So you can fold them together and pull them off. And then the top, there's always 3. You can just pull them all off together. Okay, so pull the middle leaves. If you have really big stems of cilantro, you might have more leaves than this on each stem or each sprig. Another sort of a cheat way, if you have a lot of herbs to prep and you don't want to hand pull them off like this, you can just lay your bunch of herbs, you can just lay your bunch of herbs down like this, and you can take your knife and just kind of scrape them off. Sometimes you get some of the stem in there as well, so if you're okay with that, then that's a good, faster way for you to do that process. So what we need for the avocado crema is 1 tablespoon of chopped cilantro. And then we're also going to save some for a garnish in the end. All right, so we're just about there. Here we go. I think I might leave some unchopped for the garnish later. But I'm going to go ahead and chop all of this. This was about like 8 sprigs of cilantro, your average size sprig. All right, so to chop leafy herbs like this, it's easiest if you can bunch them together nice and tight. And that lets you get like a good grip, like a good crunch cutting through it. If you lay them out, like spread the leaves all out, the knife has a hard time cutting through it. So I just cut through, I'm turning this bunch 45 degrees and I'm going through again. And I'm just doing a really rough chop. We don't need to like mince this or anything. Think about how it's going to be in your crema. If you really want it to be super small, then you can keep chopping. If you don't care so much, then you can stop here. All right. So again, we need like 1 tablespoon. I like to use the cup of my hand here, kind of scrunch it up. And then right in the middle there is roughly a tablespoon. So that's about a tablespoon for my size hand. You have a tablespoon handy, compare it to your size hand and see if it ends up being similar amount as mine. So I'm dumping that in there. I'm gonna set aside all the other cilantro that we chopped, again, to use that as a garnish. Wipe the cutting board as well. All right, so we've got our cilantro in the crema too. So I'm whisking that up and then the crema is done. As long as you like the way it tastes, it's totally done. So because there's citrus juice in this, the lime juice, citrus juice prevents avocado from browning. So we don't need to worry about this browning while we prepare everything else. All right. So again, think about this consistency on a taco. I feel like it's like nice and drippy without being too liquidy. So that's a good drizzle consistency for me. All right. Anybody need me to catch you up? You guys doing okay? Let me know if you need anything. So, looking at time check. So, okay, cool. So what we're gonna do next is make our spice mix. So I have all the spices in our spice mix on this sheet pan. I can show you, I've got all these different spices here. And the tempeh is on there as well. So the shortcut for these spices is if you just buy a taco spice mix in a packet, which you can absolutely do. You do not have to mix all these spices yourself. But this allows you to modify it if you don't like spicy and you want to cut back on that, then you can. So I'm gonna walk us through this, the amounts of everything and what the spices are. I'll start with the spices that I think are giving this blend the most flavor. Like when you actually taste the blend, when you taste the tempeh in the end, I think it's these specific spices that you're tasting the most. The first one is cumin. Okay, ground cumin is a really important spice for tacos. You absolutely, I would say every taco you've ever had, every maybe not every taco, because there's fish tacos, that doesn't really have that. But, you know, beef tacos, pork tacos, tempeh tacos, these have cumin. Cumin is a very important spice for this. Another very important spice, this is smoked paprika. So paprika comes from peppers. Smoked paprika is the same thing, it's just smoked. So it gives you, this is a really, really helpful spice when you're making plant-based meals that you want to remind you of the animal-based version. Smoky flavor is a very good one to have. Okay, so from there, we've got chili powder. This one is a little bit darker, maybe darker than what you have at home. but that's only because that's what we had in our kitchen here. So chili powder can be spicy. It depends on chili. If it's just called chili powder, they use like whatever chilies to make it. There's not a specific kind of chili. So depending on what chilies they use to make it, some brands might be spicier than others. So keep that in mind. If you're worried about this one, maybe only add a little bit, or you can omit it altogether and you'll still have tons of flavor. So I said I was going to read the amounts and I have not been doing that. So chili powder, 1 tablespoon, cumin, 2 tablespoons, smoked paprika, 2 teaspoons. Okay. So next is paprika that's not smoked. So just additional peppers. We've got lots of pepper spices in here. And this is 1 teaspoon of paprika. Dumping it in there. Okay. Next, we have garlic powder. This is half a teaspoon of garlic powder. You could add more. This is really not like a super like strong flavor. So you could add more and it wouldn't overpower it if you wanted to. Then we've got onion powder. This is half a teaspoon of onion powder. So if you think of the foods that were used to make these spices, so far we've got pepper, onion, garlic, cumin seeds. Then we've got some red chili flake, red pepper flake. Again, this is another spice, like spicy spice. So if you're concerned about spiciness, you can omit this or do less, whatever you like. But this is only going to be half a teaspoon, not a lot. And those are pepper seeds and pepper skins to make red pepper flakes. We've got oregano, dried oregano. This is half a teaspoon as well. So this is the only herb we're adding. All the others are spices. Then just salt and pepper remain. This is normal black pepper, ground black pepper. This is a half teaspoon. Again, if you're worried about spice, you can reduce the black pepper as well. And salt. We're starting with a small amount of half teaspoon. If you want to increase it, I would recommend waiting until the tempeh has cooked in the spices for you to taste it and see if you want to add more salt. Okay, so this is our spice mix. Just mixing it together. So if you were to buy a taco spice mix, it would essentially have these ingredients. It might be different versions, or like slightly different ingredients in here, but this is for the most part what you're gonna get. Absolutely guaranteed cumin will be in that mix. Cumin is a very important spice for tacos. Okay, so that is, yes.
Eliza, sorry, I have a question because I bought I have the taco mix. How much should I use of this?
Okay, good question. Let me think. This probably made, I think this probably, well, and I actually did half the amount of all of you. I would say, I mean, did it come in a packet?
No, it's like a big, I use this a lot. It's a big container.
You could honestly do like a 1/4 cup. Like, I know.
Yeah,
but
that's what I was thinking. Okay.
I mean, look at the sodium content. If you're concerned about that, that might be your cutoff. But if the sodium is low or if you don't mind it, then definitely go heavy with the spice, because spices are what give this flavor, you know? So
Okay, thanks.
you don't want to skimp on the spice. All right. So now I'm going to preheat a pan. So again, I have my induction burner right here next to me. And we're almost ready to cook our tempeh. So I'm going to heat up this pan for the tempeh. Okay, so this is going to be on like medium high. And while that's warming up, we're going to crumble our tempeh. So this is the brand of tempeh I got. There are other brands out there. this is what the tempeh looks like. Tempeh is, I'll talk about it while I open it up, but tempeh is fermented soybeans. So if it looks like beans all squished together into a rectangular shape, that's exactly what it is. And this brand and some others also have some grains added. This one has brown rice. The reason for that, it's not necessary to make tempeh, but the reason why some of them have rice or barley or something like that is because the grain, the carbohydrate content in the grain helps to feed the bacteria and helps get the fermentation process going. So soybeans have carbohydrates as well, but not as much as grains. So it's just sort of a shortcut method. Okay, so yeah, it's sort of like slippery, just like a pale color, sort of looks like peanuts, something like that. So what we're gonna do, it's very easy to break apart. I'm gonna crumble this up. And I definitely recommend doing this with your hands. You can just smush it. You're essentially breaking it apart into the individual beans. So there are a couple ways that you could actually make tempeh tacos, probably more than a couple. But so we are crumbling them. But another way that people oftentimes will cook tempeh is that they take the block of tempeh and they slice it like a 1/4 inch thick. And you can like sear it in a pan that way. That's a very common way to make tempeh. But I kind of figured that this was an option to show you. I feel like the slicing the tempeh is something that people see more often when they see tempeh. So I wanted to show you something that maybe you haven't seen before. And crumbled tempeh kind of resembles ground beef in a taco. So that fork or the masher that you used for the avocado crema, you're gonna use that again, because once this cooks a bit in the pan, we're gonna mash it up. It's not gonna mash as easily as avocado will, but I want to break up the beans once it's softened in the pan to make it look a bit more like a traditional meat taco. So if you have any people that you're making food for tonight that are a little hesitant about tempeh, if you make it not look like beans, they might be more likely to accept it. I'm not always a proponent of tricking people into eating healthy food, but if it's the first time they've ever tried tempeh, they might be more open to it if it looks like a taco they've seen before. All right, so
We have a question from Bev.
only using 1 8-ounce pack. Should I adjust the water added? Yeah, yes. So I'm also only using 1 8-ounce pack. I usually make a smaller amount than all of you because I don't want to waste the food. So yeah, the amounts of water I put in the recipe were kind of, just an estimate. So you'll see through the process, you don't really need to measure the amount of water. It's just kind of a, follow your instinct kind of thing.
Okay.
If you don't have a cooking instinct, then I'll help you through it.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, so this tempeh is crumbled up. It, by crumble, I mean broken into the individual beans. Okay, so if you did that with your hands, you'll probably want to wash your hands. I'm going to change my gloves and I'm going to bring the burner on under the camera so you can see it. And we're going to start cooking. So tempeh, the best way to cook it is to steam it in addition to, anything else you might do to it. But steaming as a part of the cooking process is important. It helps to penetrate the bean, helps to break it down, make it soft. The beans are also, like, if you tried a little bit right now, it's fine to eat like a little bit raw if you wanted to try it. You shouldn't eat a whole bunch of it raw. But if you want to try a little bit, you can. It's kind of bitter. So steaming it helps to break up that bitterness. All right, so my pan has been preheating. I can feel that it's nice and hot. I actually turned it down to like medium. My burner gets extremely hot, so I don't want to go crazy. This is it should be a nonstick pan. So, all right, I'm getting canola oil. So if you use, you could do like one tablespoon to 2 tablespoons of canola oil. Canola oil is good for high heat. So you can tell this pan is hot because the oil is already flowing over it like water. Okay, so I'm gonna have to take a step back when I put the tempeh in just in case. Okay, so I'm adding just the tempeh on its own into this pan right now. And it's nice and sizzly right off the bat. Okay, awesome. So you want to make sure you're coating it with the oil. And this first step that we're doing with the tempeh, we're gonna try and like brown it a little bit in the pan. Not a ton, but I can actually already see, because my pan was nice and hot, I can already see some pieces are like a little more golden. They're getting toasty already, which is great. This spoon is huge. I get a more appropriately sized wooden spoon. So yeah, it's definitely getting a little golden brown. Hopefully you can see that in some of these spots. And smell it as well. It smells like nutty. It's kind of like a sweet nutty scent. So you want to be stirring this pretty regularly. You don't want it to be burning. But inevitably, when you cook anything on a relatively high heat, stuff is going to get stuck to the pan. And that is actually going to be, the deep glazing process, adding liquid to the pan that has stuff stuck to it. That helps to release everything that's stuck to the pan and bring those flavors back into the dish. So the water that we're adding, I'm actually gonna make a little hole in the middle. There's not a lot of stuff stuck to the pan just yet, but there will be. So I'm making a hole in the middle, and I'm gonna get some water. I actually have a little bit of water left over from the avocado. This is about a 1/4 cup of water. And this is 1 pack of tempeh, just so you can get a sense. I'm pouring the water right in the middle. It's bubbly right away. And I'm mixing it all up. I'm gonna let all the tempeh get coated by the water, and the water is going to steam it while it evaporates. So this water is being used for 3 reasons in this recipe. One is to steam the tempeh. The second reason is to deglaze the pan, so anything that gets stuck to the pan gets unstuck when the water touches it. And the third reason we're using water is once we add the spices, the water mixes with the spices and kind of creates like a sauce. You can also add additional oil to this if you'd like. So tempeh is not a fatty food. So if you're trying to make this more similar to like a beef taco or something, that animal protein that's got fat in it, then you might want to just add more oil to your pan. You can also do this later on. Once it's done cooking, you can drizzle some additional oil in there and finish it off. So right now we're just cooking with water, in addition to the canola that was in there originally. All right, so most of this water has evaporated. There's still like a little bit of moisture left on the pan, but most of the water has evaporated. You can still see a little bit of it there. Okay. So that's definitely helping to steam the tempeh to get rid of that bitter flavor. So what we're going to do now is add our spice blend. Okay, you can't tell how big this bowl is by proportion, but if you look at like with my hands, compared to the amount of spice here. Hopefully that helps you. So I'm dumping all of this spice blend in here. And like I was saying before, you don't want to skimp on the spice with this dish. Tempeh is a pretty neutrally flavored ingredient. So the spices are really helpful to make this taste like a taco that you've had before. So this immediately looks very different, right? The pale color of the tempeh is now coated in these dark brownish red spices. So you want to give it a good mix, make sure it's really well coated with the spice. How are you doing at home, those of you cooking? You've got your tempeh on and you're cooking along with me?
Yep, I'm good.
Awesome.
I'm good.
Okay, let me know if any of you need me to repeat anything.
I have a question.
Sure.
I guess my daughter ate the plain yogurt that I bought. Any substitution recommendations?
I would say like sour cream, or
Yeah.
even if you have like milk or cream of some kind, as long as it's not like hazelnut creamer or something like that.
Right.
You could
Okay.
add that in there. Just be careful with how much you add a little bit at a time.
Okay.
But
Thank
yeah,
you.
anything that's like milky or creamy like that. Okay, so this is pretty dried out now. There's not like any water left in there that I can see, but we want to keep steaming. So I made a hole in the middle here. Now that the spices are on the beans, I don't want to pour the water over the beans because it's going to make the spices wash right off. So I made a hole. I'm going to get some water. And I'm doing another, probably a quarter cup. You don't have to do this much or this little. You don't want to do too much because it'll just take a long time to cook off. But all right, so I scraped the pan. This is a non-stick pan, so it's really non-stick. There's really not a lot of stuff sticking to it at all. But if your pan has spicy stuff to it, it probably does, honestly, unless you're using a non-stick pan like this. You're gonna want to be scraping the bottom of the pan to get that stuff off once you add the water. And you can see the liquid is now turning red. So that helps create a sauce at the end. So we're gonna keep stirring this around. Keep making sure that all the beans get coated with the water so it steams them. Once most of the water is cooked off, you can add more water.
Are you still on medium high or did you turn it down?
I'm basically on medium right now.
Okay.
Keep an eye on, like it should be like pretty hot. But if you feel like it's burning and sticking, then you'll want to turn it down. And again, my burner gets super, super hot. So my medium might be different than your medium. So you can see how once the water touches the beans, they kind of like, the spices get washed off. So, I mean, it's not like the spices themselves evaporate. So everything will get coated again in the end, but might as well try to prevent that if we can. But so you do want to keep on stirring and make sure all the beans touch the water so they get nice and steamed. So as these are getting softer, you can start to use your fork or your masher and mash the beans up. So I'm wiping the avocado off of my fork that I used. There's probably still a little bit of avocado left on there. That's okay. So the softer they get, the easier they are to mash. So if they're still giving you a lot of resistance, you can just push harder, or you can wait till they steam a little bit more. But you can see as I'm mashing them, you know, the inside is coming out. So the parts that are still just like a neutral tan color are now being exposed to the beans. So you're getting more coverage, more spice coverage. Or sorry, now being exposed to the spice is what I meant to say. So yeah, you're getting better spice coverage. My dad always says, you want to expose your food as much as possible, like as much surface area as possible to the sauce or the spice. So that's what we're doing here. And today is actually my dad's birthday, so I'll tell him that I talked about him in this class tonight. So I'm mashing this up, so you can kind of see this part is mashed versus this is the beans. You can tell this looks like individual beans. This is starting to just look like crumbled chicken, maybe. So I'm gonna, the water is pretty evaporated now, so I'm gonna add a little more water and then I'll keep mashing. Add the water off to the side rather than pouring it right on top. Mix that up. So we're continuing to steam. And we're getting near the end of this point, so I wanna make sure we don't run too far over 6:30. Okay, so you wanna continue to mash, and there are two things left that we need to do to prepare for the tacos. One is to cut our lettuce, and the other is to cut the mango. So I'm gonna continue to mash this, and once this is mashed, I will show you the other, the lettuce and the mango. So the lettuce that we're using is butter lettuce. I like that kind because it's nice and like smooth, and it also has a crunchy, like the further you go into the heart of the head of lettuce, the crunchier it gets. So I've got some pieces that are kind of from like the middle of the head of lettuce. All right, so this is nice and mashed. So we still do have some like beans in there. We don't need to get rid of them entirely. But this definitely looks nice and mashed up. So what I'm gonna do is turn this down a bit, not to low, but I don't want it to be so hot that it's gonna burn without me mixing it. And I'm gonna set this aside. And you can check on it periodically, add a bit more water periodically, but I'm moving my burner carefully to the side. So I am gonna add a little more water, and then I'll do the lettuce. All right, so I'm just mixing up the beans and letting them steam, just like we've been doing. So actually, I think what I'm gonna do before the lettuce is the mango. If this is a good sized mango, we definitely don't need all of this, but I wanted to show you how to cut the whole mango. So what we're gonna do, so this, it's the more narrow way to look at it, and turn it this way, and this is wider. So the pit runs down the middle of the mango, right down here. So we can cut these sides off, and we should leave the pit right in the center. But what I'm gonna do before I cut those off is take a peeler. This is a Y peeler, shaped like a Y. This is a more ergonomic type of peeler. And I'm gonna peel away from me, peel that mango skin off. So this is just one way to cut. I'm sure you've seen, or maybe not, but there's another way that people often cut mangoes, which is to cut the sides off, or the cheeks, as our executive chef calls it. Cut the cheeks off, and then dice it, and flip the cheek inside out, so the cubes poke up off the skin, and you can scoop them out. But we're not dicing, we're gonna be slicing. So I'm just peeling one side of this that we're gonna cut off. Peel the top of it here as well. This mango is pretty soft. I was worried it was gonna be too soft, but it actually seems totally fine. So, okay, this is the more narrow side. I peeled a little bit further back than halfway. And I'm taking my knife and you kind of just like, you cut maybe like a third of the way because the middle third is gonna be the pit. So you can you can feel if you hit the pit while you're cutting through. But all right, I didn't hit the pit. There we go. So this is one mango cheek, already peeled. And this we're gonna slice. This is much more than you need. The whole mango you definitely don't need. So this is just an appetizer for you. You get to eat while you go. And I'm slicing this about as thick as I did the onion. I'm keeping an eye on my tempeh and make sure it's not too dry, not burning. So this mango we'll probably do like maybe 3 or 4 slices per taco. And then the rest of it, you get to just eat for fun. Okay, so we've got these nice thin mango slices. So I'm just gonna demonstrate that for you rather than the entire mango for the sake of time. And then I'm gonna show you the lettuce after I mix my tempeh. So tempeh is still looking good. So you can kind of see now that it's mashed up and there's still some water in there, it looks like a sauce. Like it's not dried out. It's got like a saucy liquid in there, which is great. So I'm gonna add a little more water just because I don't want this to dry out while I'm cutting the lettuce. So probably another 1/4 cup of water in there. I'll just roughly mix that up. And this should be on like medium heat. Maybe a little less than medium because you don't want it to dry. But all right, now I'm gonna get the lettuce leaves. So like I said, this is butter lettuce. This is like the leaves are relatively small. And this, the whiter part is nice and crunchy. So I'm gonna cut this also into strips, just like the mango and the onion. I'm turning down my tempeh a little because I don't want it to get too dry. So cutting this into strips or ribbons. I just stacked the leaves on top of each other and I'm cutting across them. So again, there's a shortcut for this. You can just buy shredded lettuce, or you can even get like coleslaw mix, like a shredded cabbage that you can use for an extra crunch. All right, so yeah, we've got our shredded lettuce here off to the side. And so we're almost at 6:30. So I'm gonna tell you the final thing to do. I have a little bit more liquid to cook off with my tempeh here. But the final thing to do is to get your tortillas ready. So if you're using corn tortillas, those can be sort of not very flexible. I wrapped mine in plastic because I didn't want them to dry out while I was prepping everything else. But sometimes they're flexible enough, so you have to test it. If you can fold it and it doesn't crack, then you're okay. If you are using flour tortillas, those are much more flexible because flour has gluten and gluten is the thing that makes wheat flexible. But corn tortillas are gluten-free, but they're also the traditional tortilla for a taco. That's why we're using them. All right, so I'm mixing up my tempeh. That last bit of water is cooking down, but I don't want to let it dry out fully because I want to leave some sauce in there. So You can tell, I guess, how like liquidy it is if I tip it and it slides. So that's a little bit too liquidy. I'm gonna cut a little more off. So one of the best ways, I think the best way to, if your tortilla is not flexible enough, put a few, put them like this on a plate and stick it in your microwave with a little cup of water and just do like 20 seconds. And you don't need to like cook the tortilla, it's already cooked. You just need to give it a little bit, you're basically steaming it a little bit to soften it. You could also put it in a pan and just give it enough heat on both sides, just a couple minutes on both sides, maybe not even. And that will give it a little bit more flexibility. You don't want to toast it because that will make it not flexible. So it's kind of a tricky balance. But these are flexible enough as they are, so I actually don't need to do that. All right. I'm gonna start assembling tacos while the tempeh is finishing up here. Okay, I'll push the lettuce to the side and the mango to the side. So you can see my plate. Also check on your onions and see what those look like. So these are my onions. They're definitely more pink than they were before. The sugar and the salt helps to draw out the moisture from these, which makes them softer. So they will still have crunch, but they won't have that like super pungent flavor that onions often have when they're raw. So this is like a more palatable way to eat onions, I think. Especially if you are not the kind of person that likes raw onion. All right, my tempeh is perfect. So if I let it slide down the pan, it's slower. You can see there's that sauce right there. It's nice and like thick. It's not watery. It kind of looks like a really thick chili. So we're good to go. I'm gonna put my 3 tortillas here. And I'm gonna start first with the tempeh. Put it right down the middle there. And I always talk about how important it is to make your food visually appealing. I know that sounds cheesy, you eat with your eyes, people hear that all the time, but it really is true. I like the best analogy I can give you is imagine you cooked all of this delicious food. It's so beautiful, so colorful, but you put it in a smoothie. And then you have to drink a brown liquid. That's disgusting. Nobody wants that. So making it look nice and pretty like this makes a big difference. All right, so I've got my lettuce here. So the lettuce gives a nice like crunch, like a watery, earthy, neutral crunch. Okay, then we've got our mango, which is a totally different flavor than anything else here. This is obviously very sweet, tangy, really, really delicious. Okay, so I'm kind of layering those slices. Layering 3 or 4 slices of mango on each taco. And then we've got our red onion.
Bev was asking about if they drain the onions.
So you're not going to use all of these tonight, probably. So to put them in the fridge, keep them in the liquid. And you likely won't do anything with the liquid unless you wanted to drink it.
Okay.
But yeah, so you can keep them in the liquid while you're storing them in the fridge.
Okay.
They won't last as long as fermented pickles because they're not fermented. They'll last, 5 to 7 days, just like any other food in the fridge.
And do you have to let them cool all the way before you put them in the fridge?
Yeah, with any of this stuff, let it cool all the way before you put it in. Right now, I was able to put my hand in it and it was not hot, but it wasn't cold either. It's just kind of room temp.
Okay.
But yeah, you can let it sit out and cool down while you're eating. and then you'll be good. Put it in the fridge. So we've got our crema, can't forget. Do a little bit of the crema across the top. So aren't these colors so beautiful? The pink, the yellow, the green, the like deep orangey brown. I love these colors together. And then our cilantro in the end, can't forget that. A garnish, I know some people don't like to buy herbs because they go bad in the fridge and it's annoying to make them and stuff. But garnishes really go a long way with making your food look nice. And they add that little bit extra flavor boost at the end. So here we go. These are our tacos. So you can pick it up and like, hold it like a taco. But for display, this is one way to do it. Another way to display it, if you wanted to display it while it's folded closed, you can cut a lime lengthwise in half and then into quarters. And you can prop these up like bookends right next to the taco and it will hold the taco up. So I'll show you. That's what I did for the photo that you all saw when you signed up for this class. So there, it's got some little taco bookends there. Holding it up. So those of you that cooked along, how do they look? Definitely want to see. I'm going to change to the gallery view.
I haven't put mine together yet, but
Okay.
it all looks great. If I can convince my husband that it's not beans.
I mean, the spices, he will like the spices. Nice. That's great. I love it. Thank you for sharing. That's great. Lori, how are you doing?
Mine are not put together yet either, but
Okay.
they're close.
Is everything looking good and tasting good?
Yeah.
Ready?
My tempeh didn't mash like very well. Not as good as yours. Like
It's not soft. You kind of have to use like pressure to mash it.
I've been mashing, but it still looks like beans.
So
Like it doesn't look like yours, but I keep just adding more water to try to soften them more.
yeah. I mean, it also like the mashing is not a necessary part of the recipe. It's just like if you have a husband that doesn't like beans, then that's a thing to do.
Yeah, I was gonna try to trick everybody that it's meat. So I gotta.
Like as you put it on the tempeh on the bottom so we can cover it. I'll cover it up with all this other stuff.
There you go. Yeah. But I know we're past 6:30, so thank you all very, very much for cooking along, being here, for your questions. I appreciate you so much.
Thank you.
Hope you enjoy your meal and your family enjoys your meal.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Have a good one.